We've all seen how history can repeat itself from time to time. You know, you can actually learn from that in the garden. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at learning from your mistakes. During my years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore and create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to The Garden Home, a show about design and blurring the lines between inside and out. Now in today's show, we're going to focus on the topic of learning from history. Now we've all made mistakes, but you know, I once heard that the biggest mistake we can make is not learning from our mistakes. And that's especially true in the garden. You know, if you can see your mistakes coming and learn from them, you can often avoid catastrophe. For example, I lost an old oak tree to lightning, so I definitely wanted to make sure this doesn't happen to any of my other great trees around the property. Also, by spending some time in historic documents, I was able to understand better the details of the period. We made sure they were accurate right here at the Garden Home Retreat. We'll also take a look at ways that I've spread color and successful design principles throughout the garden. Now, if you want continued success in the garden, what I've learned is you've got to build on what really works. Let me show you an example. Come on. I don't know about you, but I love hydrangeas, and I've made plenty of mistakes growing them, mainly putting them in too much sun. That's why I love this particular variety, because it can take full hot sun. On this hot summer day, just look at how these blooms are performing. There are thousands of them. It really doesn't require a lot of care. Absolutely no problems with pests. We make sure that they get plenty of humus when we plant them, so we work a lot of organic material into the ground. They really love that. And then drainage is important. They cannot stand wet feet. So you can see I have them on a slight slope here at the Garden Home Retreat. Now, the other thing that I think is so wonderful about this particular hydrangea is that it dries beautifully. They're not quite ready to harvest. You see how chartreuse this is? This bit will become white, and then these flowerets here that have already opened white will begin to senesce to a slight sort of pinkish green. When that happens, I can cut these, take them in, bundle them, hang them upside down in the garage, and I can use them for fall and winter arrangements. They are a knockout even in the house dried. But now the key here is you want to make sure that that bloom completely matures before you cut it and try to dry it. Give it a try. Now, speaking of learning from our past, I recently had an oak tree destroyed by lightning. What a terrible loss. Just think of how long this tree was there until it was gone literally in a flash. I certainly don't want this to happen again, so I asked Lester Fleming, a lightning rod expert, to come out and take care of my big mature trees. Hey Lester, how's it going?
Alan, how's it going, man?
I am glad to see you guys out here. I'm
Glad
telling
to
you.
be out here, man.
Well, you're all over these trees, which is a good thing. You know, just about a month ago down there in that east field, we lost a big oak.
To lightning?
Yeah, just popped it, and I didn't even know it until I started seeing it turn brown and went down there, and sure enough, there was a split all the way through it.
Man, it'll get them, no doubt about it.
You know, only when I had this big tree that I really wanted to protect did I start thinking lightning protection, but there's a lot of reasons that it makes sense.
Oh, no doubt. If you lose a shade tree like this, a huge tree, and plus when you pull up and you see this big, nice looking tree, man, I'd hate to lose it too.
Yeah, so for aesthetic reasons, they're important, but then of course the energy savings that you can have.
Yep, all the shade that it makes for your house.
Yeah, well, I think about too, I mean, by losing these things, I mean, to take that tree down that was killed, I mean, the cost there, it's huge.
Yep, the cost of lightning protection would pay for, save more money than cutting it down.
Right, being proactive rather than waiting for it to happen. Do you find that there are certain times of the year that this lightning damage can occur that homeowners ought to be more aware of?
Man, spring and summer when those storms come in.
Yeah.
And it's You know, that time of year. Fall and winter's not so bad, but every now and then, but spring and summer.
So the winter is pretty much a dead season for lightning strikes and that kind of thing.
It was up until this year. This is the first year we had lightning strikes in January and February.
Really?
First time I've ever seen it.
So, you know, I do think that people are beginning to sense some change in the climate and with storms and so forth.
I agree. Yeah,
are you seeing more, are you getting more calls, I guess I should say, for homeowners wanting lightning protection?
We're getting a lot more. 5 years ago, we got almost none, and now we're getting just steady. People building houses on ridges,
yeah.
And ridges are the worst place.
Okay, because you're obviously you're closer.
You're higher, and then you're on top of that. You're the highest thing on that ridge.
Yeah, yeah, and then a tree on the ridge is going to be usually higher than the
the trees taller than your house. They take a strike. You know, protect your house until those trees are gone. But those trees, the highest object's going to get it.
Dr. Bob Morgan is the manager of the Environmental Quality Program in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And he tells us a little more about the importance of residential runoff and what we can do to reuse rainwater.
A building lot that hasn't been developed yet is pervious soil. That means when water falls on it, rather than running off, most of it will soak into the ground. And as it soaks in, it replenishes the groundwater, or it stays in the soil and becomes soil water, which is what waters your plants. Very little will run off. When you build on that lot and you put in your house and your house and your driveway have impervious surfaces. In other words, water doesn't soak into them, it runs right off of them. And it does that quickly. The result of that is that it gets to our streams more quickly, so our streams have more water to deal with. They come in bigger floods and more frequent floods. There are actually lots of things you can do on your site. There's a balancing act you have to play, because you want to give water a chance to infiltrate into the soil at your house. That means you have to have a really good lawn, you have to have good gardens, places where the water can get onto vegetation. The vegetation will slow it down and give it a chance to soak in. In order to do that, you have to have fertilizer, and fertilizer is one of our biggest pollutants that we deal with. So the trick is to find the balance between the amount of fertilizer you have to put on your soil to get a healthy yard, but no more, so that you don't let fertilizer run off into our streams. Well, the trick to finding that balance of just the right amount of fertilizer is to get your soil tested for nutrient content and pH and organic matter and some other things. And that can be done fairly easily with simple tools, a shovel and a bucket, and soil test boxes that you can get from your local cooperative extension service. When you do that, and they've made it really easy, they come back with recommendations based on the plant that you're wanting to grow, be it a Bermuda lawn or fescue lawn or rose garden, and they tell you how much of each particular nutrient, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium, that you would need to put on that yard to maintain it healthy, but not have excess that would run off into our stream. We can all do our part then to manage non-point source pollution if we'll maintain healthy yards to reduce runoff, if we don't over-fertilize, and if we water it just the right amount. Then we can keep all of our fertilizer on our yard and out of our streams, and our children will have a nice, clean environment to live in.
You know, I've always been a student of history, and it's served me well. I've picked up a lot of design tips over the years just by looking at old journals like this. I just want to show you this. This is called The Country Builder's Assistant, and it was written by a fellow by the name of Asher Benjamin. And you see, this was done in the first quarter of the 19th century. And what it did is it served as a guide for contractors across our new country. You see, it was published in Massachusetts and spread across the entire United States with people who loved architecture, carpenters, architects, and so forth. And I've turned here to this page where there's a plate plate number 7, and it talks about panel molding and panel molding design, as you can see here. And throughout the Garden Home Retreat, we've tried to emulate some of those early 19th century designs that you would have found in a house, a Greek Revival style house such as this in America. Now, we didn't depend entirely on old Asher Benjamin for ideas for the house. We took examples from houses around this particular region because the Greek Revival style really did reflect regional tastes and differences. Just take a look at the window panels along with the dog ear surrounds around the doors and the windows, as well as the transom over the front door. And we even had the window size so that the proportions fit the scale of the house. See, I think that's so important with design, and I think too often in modern building we forget about proportion. Now, this molding is made up of really an amalgam of bits and pieces. You see, we actually took, since we're painting it, MDF, which is actually a product that is made of sawdust, densely pressed, and great for using inside, particularly if you're going to apply paint to it. It's very smooth and very stable. So by using this recycled product, we bring a green component into the house, but we apply these old motifs that date back to the early 19th century to the style of the house. Not bad, huh? You see, there's a series of boards and moldings that wrap around these door casings. What you have is a bit of a puzzle in putting them together. But the end results, well, if you've got your old buddy Mr. Benjamin here, the results can be pretty impressive. The great thing about this molding and the detail is it's consistent throughout the entire house, so it creates a sense of harmony. You see, these door surrounds are connected to the window surrounds by the baseboard, which is very large and again picked up out of either Mr. Benjamin's book or some local property, and then that connects around tying to the windows as well as to the fireplace mantles. Now, I don't want to lead you to believe that our builder used the builder's companion. These had to be transcribed onto architectural drawings so they could build them as precisely as Mr. Benjamin would have done back at the beginning of the 19th century. You know, what I love about these flower borders is that they are so successful. This year we wanted to pack in even more color than last year using a variety of perennials and annuals, and we've certainly done that. We've got this beautiful lemons and oranges Gaillardia. We've got a wonderful coleus that has a citron sort of color, and just take a look at that hyssop. And this wonderful little annual called Mexican hat. I just love the colors on it and the way it comes up like this. It's gorgeous in wildflower arrangements. Now, another successful part of this particular side of the garden is the way the rosemary's grown in front of the tool shed. And I have to brag on the strawberries. They have done so well as a ground cover under the espaliered Gala apples. Not only have they proven to be a great evergreen ground cover, the fruit this year was especially sweet. So the way I see it, the more strawberries, the better. So I picked up 10 little plants, and you won't believe what 10 plants will do in just the manner of a growing season. What I'm going to do is I'm going to plant them under that espaliered apple tree over there. As you can see, I tried some nasturtiums this year, and they didn't do so well. The thyme on each end, well, it's doing great. So I think these strawberries will be just the ticket. They worked over here, so I'm going to build on the success of that idea and apply it over here to this side. I've always tried to look for the best performers and the best combinations for any given season. Right now in high summer, when it's really hot, you can see these zinnias are really putting on a show. They're rocking and rolling. But you know, what you want to do in a garden like this is you want to make sure you have a good combination of foliage and bloom. That's why I planted a lot of this coleus, a sun coleus. It can take as much intense sunshine as any of these bloomers down here. And I love it because the purple veining in the leaf is picked up somewhat in the other colors in the bed here. Now, it's so important to learn from what you've grown from one year to the next. In the spring, choosing the right plants that you know are going to perform really can make a difference in your garden's overall performance. Believe it or not, there's several plants out there that can really take the heat. They can look great in your garden throughout the summer, whether it's in containers or in the landscape. George Strimple tells us more about some of these forgiving plants.
Everyone wants to have a green thumb. Some of the simplest ways to do that are have varieties that perform and are forgiving to the gardener. One of my favorite varieties is Coleus. Really has great outdoor performance from east to west, north to south, across the nation. It can dry down slightly and it still comes right back and performs for you. Combined with other plants that have those same similar characteristics, almost giving you like a container garden right in your landscape. Another is Diamond Frost. Flowers all summer long and really mixes with everything. It's just a really versatile plant. You can see it together with the Coleus, again, performing well, mixing well, and blending well. So if you want to have success in gardening, look for plants that are forgiving and are going to work with you throughout the summer months. So that if you don't water it that one time, you're going to go back and it's going to just jump right back for you and perform again throughout the rest of the season.
I just can't tell you how much enjoyment I've gotten out of having these white Dorper sheep out here on the farm. They are really docile, but more than that, I think it's that they're adapted to this part of the world. You see, they come from South Africa, and it really gets hot here. So they come from a hot, dry climate. I think they're well suited. They're not like those, some of the English breeds that have lots of wool on them. I think that would be terrible to have those type sheep in this environment. What I love about them is that they're really lawnmowers. They keep this pasture clipped, and in the winter it really gets clipped down low. We feed them a little bit each day, not much because they can get too fat. You want to make sure you take good care of them. And as it worked out, we're using the well house as a place to store their feed. So each day in the afternoon I come down here and give them a little bit of feed, and they love to come up here, and it's just fun to see particularly some of the new lambs. And we started with about 23 last year, and now, 1 year later, well actually it's about 18 months later, we're up to near 50. Pretty prolific, don't you think? Now I've had some people ask me, why don't you have goats? Listen, I love goats. When I was young, we used to have 2 or 3 around, and they were so comical. But out here, we really don't have the appropriate fencing. And goats tend to like to eat brambles. They're great for clearing off areas. And what we have here is really a pastoral landscape, and I'm more interested in keeping the grass mowed and kept shorn close to the ground. Now, I put in this gate because it works really well with the fact that we're using the pump house now as a feed room. Before, the fence just ran all the way across here, and I decided to put this little gate in just to make it easier, more convenient. Now, what we did is we started out by digging a generous hole with our little backhoe. It comes in handy in this rocky ground, and I wanted to make sure I got it in really deep. Then I used one of these 6x6 posts, and we cut it off at a slight angle so it would shed water, just like all of the posts all along the fence. We sunk it in, put concrete around it, and let it set up, and then hung this gate, which matches the same material. What we used was cypress because it's a local material and it's long lasting. And we made sure that the boards ran in sync with the boards of the fence like you see here, and of course painted it the same color. You know, I can tell you it has made life with the sheep so much easier because of its association to the pump house / feed room now, and it makes it more fun to come down here and feed them at the end of the day. This is the part of the show where we take photographs you send in, focus on some of the problems, and hopefully give you some inspiration on how to move forward. Today we have a house in Florida owned by Alex and his wife, and Alex writes, Alan, we really want to bump up the color any way we can. Now Alex, I've got a couple of suggestions for you. Number one, the mulch you're using here, it looks like a shredded hardwood. It's very blonde. If you'll go to a ground pine bark, or even pecan shell, or even cocoa shells that's really dark, it will enrich the color of this immensely. The other thing that I see with this house is I'd love to bring this bed all the way down to the street like you have here, and even wrap it around the utilities here and here. You see, it looks like you've got a water meter there. If we could back this bed with a gumpo azalea that grows very low, and put the gumpos on each side like this, and carry them across the back, then you can see this gives us some room to really do some planting all in here. And just think about this being planted out in the winter. You're in Florida, so you can grow impatiens in the winter. So you could fill this in during the winter with impatiens. There's certainly many choices for the summer. One you might think about are just fibrous begonias here in pink. I would take the sign here and move it to the front, right in front of these gumpos. So the sign would go here. Just erase that, because what I want to point out, you mentioned that you'd like to have color in containers and the beds. So what you have here is an opportunity to place a large container here and a large container here at this end of the bed. Now, here you could do agapanthus. They'd be spectacular in there with those big blue heads, give you lots of color. You could go with a lantana or even one of the oleanders. And then up here, I would add another container. And for summer, what I might do is reflect, maybe put begonias in here that would reflect what you might have here. So these would echo. You could have taller plants going on here and here. And then up on the porch, I see an opportunity. It looks like a very comfortable porch, by the way. I see an opportunity here for a really large house plant. It could be something as simple as a ficus tree. If you want something that blooms, you could do another oleander that might reflect the colors that would be working here and here. And then for this underside of your foundation planting, let's move the hose around the corner here, and then use this bed, which is the foundation bed, or the bed at the foundation of the house, to maybe put a camellia here. You do so well with those there. And maybe a camellia over here on this side to help frame it. Great winter color. And then you might even think about filling this bed maybe with something like a rose that doesn't require a lot of care, like a knockout rose or something like that, that you don't have to worry about spraying, but have lots of blooms. I'm thinking anything in sort of the pink range all across here for good summer color. And then here on the corner, it looks like you're getting a lot of sun. This would be a great place for one of the pink colored lantanas here on this end. Well, those are just a few ideas for color, Alex, and I hope that's helpful to you and your wife. Good luck with your project. It's a beautiful craftsman style cottage. Congratulations. I was just taking a look at these Chelsea English cucumbers. They are really growing, and they've created an entire screen across here. Last year I did asparagus beans across here, and I had the cucumbers down in the bed. They grew out across the path and over into the squash. You could hardly get down the path, well, you really couldn't. So I learned from that mistake and decided to put the cucumbers up on the trellis, and that's the way to grow them. Well, that's all the time we have for today's show, which is about learning from the past and learning from our mistakes. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Until next time, from the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at plansmith.com.